This is Evangelist Terry Carter once again with the State of the Nation address. Today we're going to talk about the 54 offenses that Obama has committed or reasons for impeachment that the Congress and the Senate just seem to disregard. Number one is Obama's term as board chair of the Chicago Annenberg Challenge in the mid-1990s, when he and his colleague, unrepentant terrorist William Ayers, misused over $300 million in private donations meant to improve the education of minorities. Instead of spending the money on traditional learning programs, Obama and Ayers then directed the funds to local community activists who wasted it on trying to radicalize the students. An official review of the program found that it was a complete and utter failure. Count two. As an Illinois state senator, Obama directed tens of millions of state money to slumlords Valerie Jarrett and Tony Rizko, meant to provide for housing for low-income minority tenants in return for political donations. Due to the shoddy construction and the non-existent maintenance, the majority of units after less than 10 years of use have been rendered uninhabitable. Michelle Obama's politically connected $316,000 VP of a Community Affairs job at the University of Chicago hospitals while her husband was serving as a U.S. Senator. She was responsible for the design of an illegal patient dumping scheme that prevents local African Americans from using the emergency room at one of the nation's finest hospitals, and instead redirects them to community health care centers where they often receive substandard and inadequate care. The high-paying position was eliminated soon after Mrs. Obama's departure from the university. Count four. Millions in illegal contributions accepted by the Obama campaign during his presidential run. Credit card filters designed to screen out foreign money, and domestic donors who had maxed out their legally allowable limits as required by U.S. law were intentionally switched off. Count five. The Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's ongoing effort to create international small arms accords that will subvert the Second Amendment rights of the U.S. citizens. Count six. The Russian-American START Treaty, signed by Obama in April of 2010, that has no chance of making it through the Congress unless passed during the lame duck session. Not only does this treaty hamstring U.S. missile defense development and make it difficult to modernize our rapidly growing nuclear weapons arsenal, it represents the unilateral disarmament by the U.S. in return for nothing more than Russian goodwill. Moving control of the Census Bureau from the Commerce Department directly into the White House, where it is managed by Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel. Count eight. Providing de facto amnesty to illegal immigrants by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Director John Morton, who has prohibited ICE officers from enforcing U.S. immigration laws outside of the institutional settings. The ICE union has subsequently taken the unprecedented step of voting no confidence in Morton's leadership. It is my belief that Obama is allowing the borders to remain open to allow terrorist groups and drug Khazar people into the U.S. to become part of his civilian militia force that he is building. Count 9, Attorney General Eric Holder's failure to sue sanctuary cities for violating the U.S. immigration law, while at the same time proceeding with a lawsuit against the state of Arizona for enforcing the U.S. immigration laws. Count 10, failure by Obama to treat the takeover of sovereign land in Arizona by the Mexican drug cartel as an act of war. Count 11, refusal by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administrator David L. Strickland to release results from an internal investigation into the Toyota Sudden Acceleration Program that contains findings favorable to the foreign automaker. Count 12, ongoing efforts by FCC Chairman Julius Dinkowski to gain control over the Internet in opposition to a judge's ruling and Congress's will, while reclassifying Internet companies as telecommunications providers, thus making them subject to FCC regulations. Count 13, Obama and his environmentalist allies preventing U.S. industries from taking advantage of our oil-rich natural reserves, including oil, coal, uranium, and timber. Count 14, Obama's month-long stint at the UN Security Council chair in 2009, the first ever by a sitting U.S. president. Not only did this action give credibility to an international organization ruled by tyrants, it also called into question potential dual loyalties by our president. Count 15, the Obama National Security Strategy released in May that allows for the targeted assassination of U.S. citizens, including homegrown terrorists, without due process. It also has been described by the Kremlin, which knows quite a lot about these kind of things, as a new law put forth by President Obama capable of seeing up to 500,000 American citizens jailed for the crime of opposing the government. That comes from the Kremlin in Russia. The Obama executive order signed in December 2009 that allows, that's count 16, Interpol to operate in U.S. territory and with impunity and without oversight by Congress, the courts, the FBI, or local law enforcement. Count 17, deployment of over 1,200 National Guard troops to the border states where they will not under any circumstances be used to stop the flow of illegal aliens or drug traffickers. Count 18, a foreign policy that can be best described as turning away of our allies, in particular Great Britain, Israel, the Honduras, Poland, Colombia, and Taiwan, and the embracement of our enemies. That includes giving the F-16 fighters to Egypt, and the $850 million to Egypt, and the Muslim Brotherhood's part was all part of that. 19, the State Department using $23 million in taxpayer money to help transform Kenya into a constitutionally communist nation where the freedom of speech is limited and private property rights are subservient to social justice. In addition, the recently adopted Kenyan constitution allows for the practice of Sharia law in some regions, ensuring women will not be guaranteed basic human rights. Count 20, Obama's refusal to hold press conferences and answer difficult questions as is expected of a U.S. president. Never in the modern age has there been a president so unwilling to answer to the American people for his actions. Considering the public's growing anger towards his progressive policies, it is doubtful Obama will ever hold another press conference again. 21. The $26 billion bailout of the teachers' unions that Obama recently signed into law. Not only was the money taken from the food stamp programs for poor Americans in order to fund Democrat social interests, a portion will be skimmed off the top as union dues and funneled to Democrat political campaigns this fall. 22. Obama's involvement with the governor's Rod Blagojevich attempts to sell his old Illinois Senate seat. This is in the past. Even if Obama didn't try to purchase the position for his chosen replacement, slumlord Valerie Jarrett, at the very least, he had to know that the seat was for sale. Count 23. The Department of Interior Secretary Ken Salazar's plans to take control of millions of acres of public land and private land in the western states by designating them as national monuments. These are some of the spots where they are now training United Nations troops in military exercises on U.S. soil. These efforts are being carried out in secret and without input from Congress, state and local officials, and current landowners. Obama's use of taxpayers' money to pay for the Democrat propaganda, including $15 million for the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act road signs and $18 million for the perpetually misleading recovery.gov website. Count 25. The lasting damage Obama has done to the Jewish people. In his less than 2 years in office, there has been an outpouring of hatred towards the Jews, the likes of which I had never thought I would never live to see. From Helen Thomas telling the Jews to get the hell out of Palestine, to heavily armed terrorists, flotillas designated for the Gaza Strip, described as peaceful by the Western press. From throwing stones at little old ladies leaving the synagogues of Sweden to the thousands of Jewish families fleeing Muslim persecution in France, a sea change in world public opinion against the Jewish people has been accomplished during Obama's term. Because of his refusal to speak out against virulent anti-Semitism being pushed by left-wing politicians and Islamists around the world, the harm to the Jewish people will surely outlive his presidency and could have terrible unforeseen consequences. Count 26. Convicted felon and child and Chicago real estate developer Tony Retzkel's purchase of land adjacent to Obama's house in Hyde Park, Illinois. In 2006, Retzkel sold a 10-foot strip of his property to Obama for $104,500, rendering the remainder of Retzkel's $625,000 investment too small to be developed and for all intents and purposes worthless. The provision of the Obama campaign donor list to Acorn in 2007 and 2008, more complete than the ones he gave to the FEC. Acorn used the list to raise money for Obama's election from donors who had already maxed out the legally allowable contributions. Widespread voter fraud, including voter intimidation, ballot stuffing, falsified documents, and threats of violence against Hillary Clinton and supporters, committed by the Obama campaign and Acorn during the 2008 Democrat primary election. Next, Obama's refusal to release his long-form birth certificate, which would show conclusively that he is a dual citizen and therefore not constitutionally eligible to serve as president. Obama's college records, which have also been released, will also contain information regarding his dual citizenship status. Next is protecting union interests over those of GM and Chrysler bound holders during bankruptcy proceedings. forcing investors to accept millions of dollars in losses in direct violation of bankruptcy laws, money to which they were legally entitled. Next is preferential treatment given to minority and women-owned car dealerships by Obama administration officials as part of the auto industry bailout program, and forced closing of a disproportionate number of dealerships located in rural areas that did not vote for Obama. Unsubstantial firing of Corporation for National and Community Service Inspector General Waldron for exposing Sacramento Mayor and Obama supporter Kevin Johnson's misuse of $850,000 from an AmeriCorps grant. Next, the purchase of a congressional support for the passage of Obama's health care bill, including the Cornhusker kickback, Louisiana Purchase, having the Department of Interior increase water allocations to the Central Valley of California to secure the votes of Democrats Reps Dennis Cardoza and Jim Costa. Next, lying to the American people by promising that they could keep their health care coverage if they wanted to, when in reality tens of billions would be forced out of their current plans. Next, attempted bribery of Republican Joe Sestak with job offers to get him to drop out of the Senate primary race against Senator Arlen Specter. Next, directing the EPA to unilaterally set carbon emission standards, thus bypassing Congress, which opposes Obama's energy reform bill. Next, the Obama administration's statement that a panel of experts had agreed with the plan for 6 months Gulf Coast drilling moratorium, when in actuality none of them had supported the measure. Boring BP to set up a $20 billion slush fund to compensate Gulf Coast businesses and residents affected by the oil spill, to be administered by an Obama political appointee without any judicial or congregational oversight. Next is implementing a third oil drilling memorial after the first two were thrown out of court, creating a de facto Gulf Coast offshore drilling ban in opposition to two judges' rulings. Next, the establishment of a commission to investigate the Gulf Coast oil spill that contains not one industry oil expert, and whose transparent purpose is to push a partisan political agenda rather than to investigate the cause of the disaster. Obama's policy of intentionally not securing our nation's borders, in opposition to Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which calls for the President to protect states from foreign invasion, in an attempt to blackmail Republican support for comprehensive immigration reform. In essence, Obama is holding border states and residents politically hostage during the time they are being overrun by a narco-paramilitary invasion. Next, the Department of Justice illegal race-based policies regarding voter fraud as exposed by former Justice Attorney J. Christian Adams. This includes the dropping of a voter intimidation charges against two Black Panthers brandishing weapons in front of a voting location in Philadelphia, and the stated intention by political appointees to ignore voters' crimes committed by the African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities. Next, the Department of Justice purposely allowing some states to continue their disenfranchisement of military personnel serving overseas in direct opposition to the 2009 Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment MOVE Act, which was established in response to more than 17,000 military votes that were not counted in the 2008 election because the ballots had arrived after the deadline. Next, the recent appointment of Donald Berwick as the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services without even a token attempt to put him through the congressional nomination process, signaling that the Congress's constitutional obligation to vet for presidential appointees means nothing to Obama. The same can be said of the 30-plus Obama administration czars. Next, spending $20 million of taxpayer money through the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, to support a constitutional referendum in Kenya in spite of a Solander amendment which makes it illegal for U.S. to lobby for abortion in other countries. The Kenyan referendum was partially written by Planned Parenthood and is designated to legalize abortion in that nation. Next, the participation of the Obama administration in the firing of Sherry Sherrod from the USDA without due process because of a publicized out-of-context remarks that she made at a NAACP meeting in March of 2010. The White House sham investigation and BP's involvement in the release of mass-murdering Lockerbie bomber from prison. The Obama administration not only knew beforehand of the Scottish government's plan to set Abdel Basset al-Megrahi free on compassionate grounds, they even sent a letter to Scottish authorities stating their preference for his remaining in Scotland over his transfer to a Libyan prison. Next is canceling of 77 properly filed oil field and development contracts approved by the Bush administration by Interior Secretary Ken Salazar, preventing the extraction of up to 3 trillion gallons of oil buried under Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and North Dakota. More than enough to end our dependence on foreign oil and supply the U.S. with its energy needs for hundreds of years at the current consumption rates. Next is investigations by the Department of Homeland Security to determine political affiliation of people making Freedom of Information Act requests and the subsequent delay altogether ignoring requests made by Republican affiliated individuals. The hardest to prosecute in court, but worst crime of all that Obama has perpetrated against the American people is the economic tyranny his socialist policies have wreaked upon our nation. While Obama has been living the life of a king, including 5 frequent 5-star vacations and dozens of concerts at the White House and the endless rounds of golf, all paid for by taxpayer money. The increased transportation and security costs alone are in the millions of dollars. He has called for the rest of us to endure economic sacrifice. The annual $1 trillion deficits and borrowing of 41 cents of every dollar of federal spending by Obama is leading to unsustainable and potentially catastrophic national debt. The quartering of foreign UN troops in America's national forest with the intent of them invading American citizens. Selling F-16s and fighters and armors to enemy countries, buying ammo and riot trucks, claiming that the Department of Homeland Security needs them, that the Department of Homeland Security is not constitutional. because the National Guard is the defense for this country of each individual state. Therefore, the DHS military is unconstitutional. It's a violation of the Constitution. And then his continuous attempts at gun control and his persecution of Christians, and the fact that he's trying to change the Constitution on term limits of office and several other things that are going on behind the American people's backs. Anyway, all these I just mentioned are impeachable offenses, and yet the Congress and House of Representatives have failed to do their constitutional duty to remove him from office. Anyway, that's my message for today. Just keep on praying for your country, and remember that the persecution against the Christians is going to become greater and greater as long as Obama is in office. And also the fact that he supports the Islamic belief and the Muslims is also another threat to this country. Anyway, thank you, and until the next web message, goodbye and God bless.